Hello, here we are for another math lesson. We are working on page 280 in your math notebook. The lesson today is multiply and divide decimals using powers of 10. So hopefully you have your math notebook, something to write with, and either a whiteboard marker or some scratch paper. And here we go. So this is from yesterday's lesson, using equivalent decimal fractions to solve. So I'm going to let you pause this video in just a second, change those decimals to fractions, multiply, get a fraction answer, turn it back into a decimal. Pause. Okay, welcome back. So hopefully you got something like this. We say this 3/10, we write it 3/10. We say this 2/10, we write this 2/10. When we multiply fractions, we do it straight across. 3 times 2 is 6. 10 times 10 is 100. We say this 6/100ths, and here we have our 6 in the hundredths place. This would be the tenths and the hundredths. Okay, so we're going to take some of that knowledge and move it into our next lesson. So today we're going to find products of decimals. So again, products means the answer to a multiplication problem. Decimals, we're going to multiply and then we're going to divide by powers of 10. So we always kind of start simple with those powers of 10, and we're going to multiply and divide. So first of all, the question says, when in real life is it important to know how to multiply decimals? So think about that for a second. I know the most common answers when we talk about these kinds of things in my class is we talk a lot about money. Money has decimals, and then also measurements, different kinds of measurements. And when we're going to multiply those when we have more than a 1. Okay, so let's look at this. If we had these numbers like 37 and 5/10, and we wanted to make it a whole number without this decimal, what would we need to multiply? How could we do that? Well, we could multiply this by 10. If we wanted to get rid of this decimal to multiply it by 10, it would get 375. So based on that knowledge, what do you think we're going to do here to 7 and 89/100ths? You're amazing. Multiply by 100. What about 42 and 71/100ths? Again, multiply by 100 to get rid of that decimal. Now, based on that knowledge, we have 7 and 802 thousandths. So think about the place value. How many times do we have to multiply to get rid of it? 1,000. And there we go. So that would make them whole numbers. Now think about that for a second. We can't just leave things like that just because we had $37.50 and just because we want to get rid of that decimal, all of a sudden we have $375. I wish, but that is not how life works. So we're going to have to, we multiplied to get rid of it. Once we're done doing some work, we're going to have to divide to put the decimal back where it belongs. We don't get to keep it away. Okay, so here's our very first math problem. You're taking notes in your math notebook. So we have 4/10 times 3. So if we have 4/10 times 3, we have not learned yet how to multiply with the decimal, but we have learned how to multiply whole numbers. So based on what we just did a second ago, how are we going to get rid of this decimal? What are we going to multiply it by? Hopefully you said 10, right? It's going to be so much easier if we can use whole numbers. So we're going to change that into a whole number by multiplying by 10. So when we do 4/10 times 10, we get 4. Now look, we left our decimal here. We want to keep the decimal here so we know that we have one. We moved it. So now we can just multiply 3 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, so like I said, we can't just automatically give ourselves more of something and leave it that way. So we moved our decimal one place to get rid of it so we could multiply to make it easy. So now that we've moved it away, we have to put it back. So think of the opposite. What is the opposite of times 10? Hopefully you're thinking, right? This is not our final answer. Hopefully you're thinking divide by 10. So if we moved it to the right one place because there's 1 0 in 10, we have to move it back and divide by 10. So here we're going to move the decimal to the left one place, and we're going to put it back here, and now we're going to get 1 2 tenths. So we moved the decimal out to multiply with whole numbers, and then we've got to put the decimal back to give us our actual answer. Okay, so why did I multiply by 10? Just to undo my work later, to give us some numbers that we can multiply by. Okay, we're going to make it easier and easier to solve. So I'm going to let you try this one. Multiply to get rid of your decimal, and then divide to put your decimal back. Go ahead and pause the video and try that one. Okay, welcome back. Let's look at your work. Hopefully it looks like this. We only needed to move the decimal one place, times 10, so this becomes 2. We know that 2 times 4 is 8. That's an easy math fact for us. But now we have to put the decimal back. We multiplied by 10, so we've got to divide by 10. When we divide by 10, we move our decimal left one place, and we get an answer of 8 tenths. Okay, next one. Let's set this one up. This is the second problem on your math notes. So we're going to set this up like this. So we can't multiply by 10 anymore to get rid of this decimal. We have to move it over 2 places. So if I move it over 2 places, what are we going to multiply by? Hopefully you're thinking 100. So if I multiply this by 100, my new whole number is 435. So now we got rid of the decimal to make some easy multiplication. We know 4 times 5 is 20, carrier 2. 4 times 3 plus 2, 14, carrier 1. And 4 times 4 plus 1, 17. So we just multiplied to get rid of the decimal. We multiplied to get an answer. Now we have to divide to put our decimal back. Okay, this cannot be our final answer. So when we divide to put the decimal back, here we multiplied by 100. So now we need to divide by 100. So when we divide by 100, we're going to move our decimal to the left 2 times because 100 has 2 zeros. So when we move it to the left 2 times, we end up with 17 and 40 hundredths. 17 and 40 hundredths. Okay, I'm going to let you try this again. Look where the decimal is. Look how many times you have to move it to make it a whole number, and then put it back. Pause. All right, here we go. Let's check your work. Here we go. We multiplied. We've got to multiply by 100 to move it over twice. We move it twice, so we get 324 times 6, 1,944. Now we have to divide by 100, put it back. We ended up with 19 and 44 hundredths. Okay, so this time we have 2 decimals. In the other ones, we were working with 1 decimal and a whole number. Now we have 2 numbers with decimals in them. So we are going to write with an expression. We have done this before. So let's look at this. How could we multiply 3 and 4 tenths to get a whole number? Same way we did before. 3 and 4 tenths times 10. Okay, so if we did that here, we're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to multiply this also by 10 to move the decimal over, 6 tenths. Okay, so we're going to rewrite this using whole numbers. 3 4/10 times 10. If we move that over, we are going to get 34. 6/10 times 10. If we multiply that decimal over, we are going to get 6. So now we're going to do some side work. 34 times 6. 6 times 4 is 24. Carry the 2. 6 times 3 plus 2 is 20. So we get 204. Is that our final answer? No. But think about it when we make equivalent fractions. Whatever we do to the numerator, we have to do to the denominator because we have to keep the value the same. If we just started multiplying by tens all the time, we are not keeping our value the same. So we kind of have to undo what we did by multiplying these tens. So we did not just multiply by one 10, we multiplied by a 10 here and a 10 here. So essentially we multiplied by 100, okay? So we have to put it back. Let's look at this. This is not our answer, right? Is this our answer, 20 4/10? Did we move it back enough? Hopefully you're thinking no. Now here, 2 4/100. Did we move it back enough this time? We did. So let's look at that for a second. We have to undo our multiplication. So if we did this, divide by this 10, and then we have to divide by this 10, we are dividing by 10 and then 10 again, which moves it over 2 places. See how these are the same? We have the same amount of whatever we multiplied by, we have to divide by. So if we divide that by 10, we get 20 4/10. Divide it by 10 again, we've got to move one more place to the left, and we get 2 4/100. Okay, so maybe you can explain this to mom, dad, brother, sister. Maybe you have a cat or a dog. I don't know. Tell them what you did to solve this. Take me through step by step. Go ahead and pause. Explain it to someone. If you have no one to tell your computer that you're looking at right now. Okay, welcome back. Now here I'm going to have you pause again. Same thing, do this one with an expression. Remember we call it an expression because we don't have an equal sign right here, or it would be called an equation. So solve this using the expression and think about how many times you multiplied. Make sure you divide the same way to put it back. Okay, go ahead and pause and solve this. Okay, welcome back. Here we go. Hopefully it looks like this. We need to move this one place to the right to get rid of it. So that's times 10. We need to move this one place to the right times 10. So we end up with 3 times 45 as our whole number. You did some side work over here and you got 135. That cannot be our final answer. Now we have to undo this multiplication. So we did times 10 again. So we need to divide by 10 and divide by 10 again. And you should have ended up with 1 3/500. Okay, next one. Same thing, expressions. We just have to look at these decimals and make sure we move them the correct amount of times so we have whole numbers. Okay, so let's look at our 2 3/10. That's just like what we've been doing, right? We've got to write an expression. What are we going to multiply that by to make it whole? Hopefully you're thinking 10. So when we multiply that by 10. Now here, this is different. We're not going to multiply by 10 because we have to move it 2 times to the right. So that would be multiplying it by 100. So when we multiply this by 10, we end up with 23. When we multiply our 1 72/100 by 100, we end up with 172. Let's do some side work multiplication. So put that in your notes. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 7 is 21, carrier 2. 3 times 1 plus 2 is 5. Now we need to make sure we put our placeholder 0. We're done with this 2. We're going to cross it off. Don't forget this placeholder 0 before we move to this 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 7 is 14, carrier 1. 2 times 1 plus 1 is 3. Now add them up. Remember, start from right to left. 6 593. So is that our final answer? Hopefully you said no. Because we multiplied to get rid of that decimal or those decimals, now we have to divide to put them back. So we have to undo this. So we're going to undo by dividing by 10 and undo divide by 100 because that's what we multiplied by. So when we first divide by 10, we're going to move the decimal one place. And then when we divide by 100, we're going to move the decimal two more places. Now, when we multiplied, we moved to the right. So when we divide, we're going to move that decimal over to the left. So here we moved it one place to the left because there's 1 0. Now we need to move it two more times because there are 2 zeros, and we end up with 3 and 956,000. So make sure you get that all in your notes. Okay, now there's a side question here. Why is my answer 3 and 956 thousandths and not 39 and 56 hundredths? Think about that for a second. And hopefully you came up with, you wouldn't have, this would only divide by 10 and then divide by 10 again to move it here. But we needed to divide by 100. All right, another practice whiteboard problem. Go ahead and solve this one. Pause the video and solve. Okay, and now you're back. Let's look at it. Check your work. Look at all your steps. We needed to multiply by 100 to get rid of this decimal to make this one whole number, 234. We need to multiply by 10 to get rid of this decimal and make this 36. Your side work, hopefully your multiplication looks like this, 8,424. Now we have to undo that. And our multiplication, we have to undo it. So we have to divide by 100, move it over 2 times. Then we have to divide by 10 and move it over 1 time. So you should have gotten an answer of 8 and 424,000. So that is our lesson, our beginning of multiplying decimals, but here we're doing it by powers of 10. So you can move on from here to work on your problem set and your homework. All right. Talk to you guys soon.